In this video, we'll be looking at the Travel and Expense Management End User Portal and mobile interface. We'll see how end users can submit a travel request for approval, then using the mobile interface, submit expenses, which are then reviewed, approved or rejected by the expense reviewer. This is the home page of the End User Travel Portal. From the buttons at the top of the home page, we can submit a quote request if quotes are enabled, submit a new travel request, submit a new expense against an approved trip, and manage our submitted expenses. The travel administrator can also manage the text message that appears on this page to ensure that it is relevant to any travel-associated issues. This functionality also exists on the Quote, Travel Request, and Manage Expenses page. The menu option allows us to view any upcoming trips that we are managing or attending, manage our active quotes, manage any draft travel requests, and view past trips and completed quotes. Outstanding travel actions are also displayed here. In this case, there's a pre-travel questionnaire that needs to be completed. Let's create a new travel request. I'm currently logged in as the user Andrew Jackson. If the travel request is from a previously raised quote, we can pull the details of the trip directly from the quote. Otherwise, we can enter the details manually. One request can include multiple travellers, as is shown in this example. We can also save the request as draft to review and submit later, or submit the completed request for approval now. As the request has come from a quote, we only need to complete a few fields. Depending on the scope and reason for the trip, a list of assessment questions will be displayed that must be answered before the request can be submitted for final approval. Different questions can be asked for domestic and international in combination with the reason for the trip. These questions are configurable by the travel administrator. Let's complete the form, including the assessment questions, and submit the request to our manager for approval. This is the approval email sent to the manager to approve the trip to New York. The manager can see the details of the trip, including the reason for the trip, the cost of the trip, and who is traveling. The assessment questions and response are also shown. Problem responses can be highlighted to the approver for follow-up. Here we can see the travel request as it appears in the ServiceNow console. We can see the details of the trip, including who is traveling, the expected itinerary, and the response to the assessment questions with problem responses highlighted in red. When expenses are submitted against this trip, they can also be viewed here. Let's approve the trip on behalf of the manager. Now that the trip has been approved, all travellers can submit expenses against the trip as required. Expenses can be submitted via the portal or via the Mobile Now application. Let's submit an expense for the taxi fare to the airport. This is the Now mobile interface for the travel application. From the mobile app, the users can see all their upcoming trips and log expenses against approved trips, approve and reject expenses that are waiting for their approval, as well as manage delegation of expense approval, manage their own expenses, for example, resubmitting rejected expenses, view past trips, and access travel information provided by the organisation. Selecting the New York trip, we can see the details of the trip, including any expenses, that we've logged against the trip and the trip itinerary. Here is the draft taxi expense that we previously logged in the portal. Let's now submit that expense for approval. By clicking on the Submit Expense icon, we can display the Submit Expense page. We have now logged into the mobile app as Paddy, the expense approver. The mobile app will show any expenses waiting for their approval. We can see in this example that there are 4 expenses waiting for approval. The 4 expenses are from 2 different travellers and 2 different trips. We can see the expenses from Andrew Jackson's New York trip. I can either approve or reject the expense. If I reject the expense, I will be asked to provide a reason for the rejection. If we return to the portal as the traveller, we can manage our expenses from there. Rejected expenses can also be managed from the mobile app. We can see that one of the expenses has been rejected and the reason for that. Once reviewed, I can adjust the expense and resubmit again for approval. This can also be done from the mobile app.